Alright, so welcome back to another tutorial. I think this is recording with my voice coming in. My camera is set up. If my camera dies, I apologize. I'm using my phone today, which is fine, and I should do that more because it's a lot easier to set up. So today I'm going to be doing a tutorial trying to go as in-depth as possible for such a crazy module, but yeah, we're going to be talking about the ER301 sound computer here. Yeah, this thing is crazy. It does a lot of different things. So it has 4 outputs, 4 audio outputs. It can be stereo, or it can be 4 mono channels, or 2 stereo. It has 4 line input outputs that have preamps. It has 4 gate inputs, and then it has 12 CV inputs. You can also use the gate inputs as CV, but it's unipolar. These are all bipolar CV inputs. The sound computer is a crazy, meta modular situation where there's different units you can use. There's compressors, EQ, effects, some granular effects, some loopers, some oscillators, some delays, some filters, a bunch of different things. There's a whole matrix of routing that you can do with it. You can make your own custom units using the existing units on there. You can save patches, recall patches, record. Yeah, and it goes very deep, and everyone uses it in a different way. Guess some notable artists like Jan Jelinek uses the ER301 a lot for his compositions and his sets. So that's kind of why I wanted one. Also, my system is kind of built on the idea of Buchla, where you can save and recall patches of teletype in ER301. So ER301 also receives I2C over an I2C bus coming from teletype, which I might get into later, but this is assuming that you only have the ER301 and you want to learn a bunch about it. So yeah, first thing I'm going to do, I usually only end up using one of these stereo tracks as my main track, and just put everything on there. You can press these 2 buttons to unlink them. So these are now just mono channels. If you press 2, then they're stereo. You press these 2, now these 2 are stereo and these are mono. And it'll tell you on the screen. So I'm going to make these stereo. Then these are your 2 inputs for each track has the 2 inputs at the beginning, but then you can also make mixers that have inputs. So the first thing I want to do actually is set up, I could do that later, but when we're making sound, but set up the multitrack recorder, because I'm actually going to be recording stuff that I'm making on the ER301 in this tutorial onto the SD card. So there's a micro SD card slot that saves all your patches and saves your audio. You can load samples from it, etc., trigger samples and such. There's also package manager. So all of these packages are available on the ER301 site, and these are people's units. Teletype is a package that lets you send I2C, but there's a bunch of people. People are not developing for the ER301 anymore, but this is how you would install all of those packages. So if there's a unit that I'm using that you don't see, it's most likely in one of the packages. There's a CPU load, which is also very useful. It's at 3% right now, but you'll see as we start to add units like reverb and granular, the CPU tends to go up, and if it's at 99, 100, it will start to behave very slow. So, but depending on what you're doing, doesn't really get to that point. So I found at the beginning I was doing a lot, but I very quickly came back from that, so I never really never really max out the CPU, but I stay around 90 most of the time if I'm patching for like a show or something. Yeah, so there are settings. There's cool screensavers on this thing. That's not the reason to get them, but yeah, preamp settings for these inputs here. So those 4 inputs can be, I have them set to line level because usually I'm plugging in like a different synth or a drum machine into there. So I want it line level, but they can also be modular level if you want to. If you're using all of these already, these are all modular level inputs here. But if you're using if you want more modular level inputs, you can go in there. Or if you want like a boost on some modular level input, you can also go in there. So multitrack recorder. If you press in the middle here, it'll make 2 mono channels, or you can link them. You can click on them to choose your input. So like I can choose. So right now they're set to D1 and D2. It's just the last patch that I was using, but if I want them to be the output, I can do out 1 and out 2, which is going to be whatever's coming out of here, which is going to be whatever is in this chain here. So these switches down here are for the different pages. So this is to eject your card. This page in the middle is the settings, and up top is your main track. And then this other one goes to pinned controls. You can pin some controls, which I might get into for like macro use, but it doesn't really work too well for me, or I haven't found a use for it. And this shows you kind of a matrix of all the units, and you'll see that in a second. We'll go over that later when I'm talking about like routing. So yeah, we have our multitrack recorder, and let's hit record there. So this will just start recording, and it says I have 3 hours remaining, which is more than enough time. Sometimes I've had some issues with recording and then also doing some buffer stuff. It'll say like not a fast enough SD card, or not enough bandwidth on the SD card or something. You'll get like an error message. So we'll see if we run into that, but not a problem. Now that we're recording and I'm using this main track, I'm going to take the outputs from here, just go into my mixer so we can hear things. And nothing's happening now, so you won't hear anything. Yeah, stereo is very important for me, so everything in this tutorial is going to be in stereo, but you can also do mono tracks, and that'll actually relieve a lot of the CPU too, using units in mono. And yeah, I use the ER301 with teletype a lot, so that might be something that I'm doing, but I'm going to try to not do that for a lot of this. And now I just want to go over like a simple, you can do everything, like you can do your whole set in ER301, so I'm going to try and just go through a bunch of units and make like some ambient generative patch, which is, I guess, useful for modular tutorials, because it'll go over like VCAs, envelopes, sequencing, etc. So yeah, something we can do here is choose an oscillator. There are some simple oscillators, so yeah, to click insert a unit here, and this is the list of units. There's a whole ton of shit. If you scroll down to oscillators, these are a bunch of different oscillators. Sine oscillator, which has like wave folding, saw oscillator, single cycle, so you can upload your own waveforms. This is also cool for granular. You can also just chop up any wave and make an oscillator out of it. Some saws. I'm gonna go down to for polygon, or is that, I think, yeah. So these are polyphonic synths here. I'm gonna do Fortet. Shout out Fortet. And it has a trigger input here, your note information here, and then there's different shapes for the waveforms. There's detune, which adds another oscillator, and there's fall time. If you click on fall time, there's actually also rise time, so which is weird because it's like hidden, but gonna make that short. Yeah, let's send it some triggers. Now we can send triggers internally. So what I'm going to use for triggers is a square wave. Hopefully this doesn't blast my ears. So I'm going to go to the oscillators. Ideally, you'd be using this with the rest of your system. Like take an oscillator, that will also free up a ton of CPU. Like I don't recommend doing all this on the ER301. I'm showing you that you can, just so that you can see all the different units and how to use them. But yeah, I would send a square or like a clock from your sequencer, or like notes from your sequencer, etc. But we're gonna do everything on here. So let's go to oscillators. Let's do a band limit aliasing pulse. So you can set the pulse width, and then that's kind of like your you set the pulse width. That's kind of like your well, let's make sure it's recording. Sorry, it is. You set the pulse width. That's your gate length, and this is the frequency. But then you can also send it volt per octave from an input. So the way this is routed now is this is in this. So if you go here and this screen shows you, oh, I didn't even know that you can change the threshold for things. You can fire it manually, but then it's expecting an input. So I went to the input and I inserted a pulse. Now let's say I want this to be, the trigger to be like random, or like a little more triggered more randomly. I can go and add another oscillator to control the frequency of the first one. So let's see if I add a sine oscillator. And the gain, this button over here will show you different, when you're changing parameters, it'll switch between different scales. So you see this gain goes up by 100 here now because it's on the macro, but if I go there, then you can change it by something a little less. And you can see here how it's modulating it. So you can see this is unipolar or bipolar. So now this sine wave in here at 1.4 hertz is controlling the frequency of this pulse wave by a gain of 10. You can go even more, and it'll change even more dramatically, but I don't really want that. Now let's go into where our note is. Let's say we want our note to be like some sample and hold thing that's quantized. So you can add a quantizer. What's cool about the quantizer too is you can add your own custom scales. So for the quantizer here, I've added a bunch of these crazy scales down here. But let's choose something kind of normal. I don't know what any of these are. Let's just choose a scale though, because like harmonic with some notes. Okay, sorry. Any of these scales. notes. So we want to sample and hold first. It's kind of hard to find things in here too. It's like just a list, but sample and hold, click that. And we want to trigger it with something. So here's where it's useful. We want to trigger it with the same pulse that we're triggering the note with. So when you go here and you click insert a unit, instead of like adding a unit, we're going to go to the inputs. And this is where your input matrix would be, but you can also do local. If I go to local and the screen's a little weird, but it shows you a little arrow to the inputs and outputs of units. So on a stereo unit, if you're this is linked by the LED indicator in the middle, but the top it'll be left and the bottom will be right. So if you're choosing a stereo input in this matrix, just take note of where the light is. So like if you want the left output of something to control something, then do the top one, and then whatever input or output you select will be the left of that and the right. For this it doesn't matter because we're doing just a square wave, so it's the same on the left that it is on the right. So we have our aliasing pulse here. So if we start all the way to the right, we have Fortet, which is our oscillator that's up there. Then we have the gate, and we have the pulse, and then we have the volt per octave input, scale 10, the sine wave, etc. So if I wanted to take from the pulse gate, I would choose the output of this aliasing pulse. You can see that arrow is pointing to the aliasing pulse. So there, we select that. Now we have our pulse there. So our pulse is triggering the sample and hold. And then what do we need before a sample and hold is something to sample. So let's just do white noise for randomness. Oh, and then we might want to scale this because the white noise is going to be drastic, but we'll see. So we have random notes now, but our white noise is way too wide, so we can just use a VCA after the sample and hold. And let's say we want the sample and hold to also control the fall time. We can go to our local and go to the sample and holds output, or no, we want to go to our level output. Wait, what is SX? Go back to our note. Oh, scale quantizer, linear VCA. So we want to find where the VCA is for the fall time. So if we go to local and not the scale quantizer, but the SX, which is the linear VCA, click that and add some gain. Shape I like to change dynamically, so for that we're going to use CV. So I can take CV random from my stages over here, then random mode. So we have some slewed random here, Actually, I can show you the slew limiter too. So let's say this is just stepped random. Let's say you only have stepped random in your system, and you want to go to input. So you can see the LED indicator that we're getting that. Make sure this is still recording over here, 13 minutes. And let's say it's unipolar. So I'm gonna put the shape at the bottom. I'm gonna go to our input, A1, A, B, C, D. So A1, A2, A3, C1, C2, C3, etc. And then we're gonna go to slew limiter. Time is 1 second, so you can see our input here, but if we go to after, we can see that it's now slewed. We can make that something like I like when things are in milliseconds, but this is fine. I'll make this a little slower. And 1 second's actually fine. .5 seconds. Then we're going to add gain of 2 because it's at -1, and then we want it to go 0 and then 1. So we want the slewed random to be controlled by 2. So this is a way that you can affect an input. So we have like stepped going in, and we're actually making it slewed. Then we can add like a chord by detuning it by like 5 or something. And then we can add a reverb. This is the best sounding reverb in my opinion, but it tends to take up some CPU. This takes up like way too much CPU. And reverb takes up even less CPU than both of those. So if you want like a simple reverb, I would go with the reverb, but this one sounds awesome. There's damping and bandwidth, decay, dry wet mix, pre-delay. Choose a different scale. We can have a filter go before the reverb. Control that with more CV. The filters kind of have a weird taper for their curve for the CV, but that's just something to play around with. And I'm going to make this one slewed because I don't want to add another slew limiter. That's just for demonstration purposes. So I have A2. If you go in here, you can replace units. So let's say we want to replace. We click this, replace, and let's say we want to replace it with like a low pass filter. Keeps the CV. Now we can go over some effects. So there's like delay, which is really awesome. Left and right is separated. This is where teletype kind of comes in handy. So these two commands are sending 8 channels of random over I2C. So you can do like 32 channels of random or slewed random if you wanted to over I2C, and that's really useful for things like controlling delay times. So for that, I would go to Insert Unit and go to soundcomputer.cv, which is like teletype. So it receives I2C, and you can see on port 1 we're receiving that random voltage with a slew of 1200 and random voltage range between 0 and 10 volts. You can use that to affect the left delay, and then use port 2 to affect the right delay, or port 2. Sorry. Gets finicky with the knob. And you get sort of some granular like effects with that. There's also grain delay, which lets you choose a frequency, and then left and right delay time. It's another way to add nice chords. Guess now I'll show you mixing, so you can put everything that we just made into a mixer by grabbing all of it. Oop, wrong one. This one. No, it should be this one. This one, sorry. Sometimes it's hard to remember the buttons, but yeah, grab all of them by holding that button and scrolling to the right, or doing from the other direction. Releasing and then doing move to mixer. You can also copy and paste them or cut them, but we're gonna move it to a mixer. So put all that into a stereo mix for us that we can control the volume and the pan of. I like to put a limiter at the end, and also put a compressor, and then we can come back to that. So let's do another mixer. We're gonna place a mixer this time, stereo mix. Go into the mixer and go over some granular things. So we go to manual grains. You can click it and then select from card or select from pool. So let's go over card first, and then I'll show you pool later. Yeah, with the other one. So we can check our CPU now that we have some other stuff going on. So now we're at 43% with manual grains and all that. The more shit you have in your library too, the kind of more annoying it is. So if I go to like field recordings or something, you can preview field recordings with this. I don't know what that's of.
And folks, from the flight deck, we'd like to give you a warm welcome aboard JetBlue's flight 1524 with nonstop service to New York's JFK Kennedy Airport.
So that's audio that I took on a flight, and you can see that it will not play it immediately. It wants like triggers to trigger the manual grain. So this is just for this algorithm. If you're using the variable speed sample player, it will just play the sample, and you can change it that way. If you go into the settings, you'll see there's nothing, but for the variable speed sample player, it'll tell you if you want to play it once or like play slices, etc. You can go into your buffer by going to edit buffer, and there's a bunch of, you can make slices here for triggering slices. I can go over that later, but you can normalize the whole thing, make sure it's the max volume, cut things, etc. But for this, we just need normalization is fine. I'll show you how to like cut things later. If we go to trigger, we want to trigger our grain somehow. I like to use some random pulse. So we can go here and make another pulse oscillator. This is where I would use other things. We went over a pulse oscillator, so I'll use something else in the system. So I just have a looping envelope coming from this WMD mini slew over here, and you'll see it. So I'm going to go to the end of cycle of this looping envelope here to our trigger input. Now these inputs are just faster. They're like 96 kilohertz or something. So that's why they're dedicated for pulse, but you can use them for whatever. We go to our gate 1, and you can see it's triggering our sample. Okay, I switched over to OBS because my computer was, my storage was out. So, here we have our grain. I'm going to change the time randomly by sending some random CV to the fall, or to the FM of that. You can see that speeding up and slowing down over here. And then we want to go through the audio, right? Because we're only hearing the noise at the beginning. So at the start time, I'm going to also send that some random CV. Slewed random is the best thing ever. I don't live by LFOs, but you can also use LFOs. A3 is another slewed random. We're going to have that influence the start by 1, so it goes through the whole thing. Now you can hear the duration. Now I'm going to change the duration randomly with some voltage from teletype. I don't think we used 3 yet. And do the same thing for the pan. Let me add like a free verb. You can change what the view of this looks like by holding this button. You can change how big it is by pressing the button and then doing the same thing. Now this could definitely be normalized, so. And save that. Now you can also I hope the resolution on this is okay. You can also save the preset, so let's go over that. If you press this and this, you have your preset manager. And all of these slots are full, but I can go over anything. So don't really go back. So let's say I go to whatever this was. I can save here. I can rename it to a new thing. So I can go here and do erase and do tutorial. Save. It's going to ask if I want to save the sampled buffers. Anything that says save as, you want to save. I'm not using that 39 second. Oh, so I changed the field recording, so it wants me to save that. I normalized it, so I'm going to do that. Save it to a new file over here and name it norm. Not that I'm going to even remember what it is, but for now, just name it as norm. You save. Oh, it's saving it. Now it says replace, which means save. So continue with quick save. Now it's saved to slot 13. So if we go back, it's there. And load something else, and then load that one back, and it should be the same. So yeah. So now let's say that I want to trigger some slices of something. Go in here. I'm going to do variable speed sample player and choose some amen break, of course, is the classic. Real drummer funky breaks. That's good. That one's a good example because it has some swing to it. So I'll show you that you can like divide things by a certain time to get your slices, but you can also do it by onset. So maybe it'll do a good job with the swing in that sense. But let's cheat. So play duration, you can play it once or you can repeat it. Or you can loop it on a high gate, and we want to play by slice now because we're going to slice this up. CV to slice can be by note per octave or just by like voltage index or nearest. I tend to leave it on index, but if you wanted a sequencer like specific notes to be to trigger it, you can also do it that way. Go to edit buffer, and we have our buffer here. You can see all of it. This is the whole thing. It's pretty good in gain. Go in here and add slices manually by doing add slice. can really get up there and be like, I want the slice to start here. I'll add a slice there. So I can go through this whole thing if I wanted to manually add the slices. I want to slice there. I want to slice there, slice there. If you go into menu, I can clear the slices that I just made. And then we can do sliced by division. So let's say we wanted 16 slices. See, some of them land, some of them don't land. So that's a weird thing, but you can do slices that way. This is good for granular, because you can just make a shit ton of slices and scan through them. It's good for good to do that for the single cycle player, but we're not going to do that. So let's just make whatever slices and clear them again. For this one, we are going to do slice on onset. So it's going to pick up, it's going to detect where it thinks there is a trigger, and it's doing a pretty good job here. So 13 slices seems like about right. We got all our slices in there on the onset. There is go to zero crossing so that there's no clipping. And we're going to have these triggered by the same gate that is triggering the the sample and hold, sorry. So let's go to local here, and remember the sample holds at the beginning of our thing, but now you see the whole tree of everything that we've done. So we're going to go to the beginning, to our aliasing pulse. Now that's triggering our first slice. We can also do I can go to where that is, and if I want a different sample and a hold, I can just copy this white noise sample and hold and VCA. Copy. And then we can use that for our slice. So we're not going to need the VCA for this, so I'm going to go to slice, paste, delete the VCA because we're going to have control over that level here, and just make it 1. But the trig needs to come from somewhere, so let's make the trig come from the same place. Save this buffer. So the reason that it is hitting the beginning one a bunch is because it's actually a bipolar. So start it in the middle, and that'll be true random. So it's good to keep note of that. Sample and hold is bipolar. selecting it again for the pitch. And this we do need the VCA for because there's no gain on the pitch. And this one we can just have be the gate, or we can do a local too. I'm gonna move that to a mixer. See, we're at 80 now. The bigger the grain, the larger the CPU is going to be. Yeah, so the bigger the grain on the manual grains, the larger the CPU is gonna, the more CPU the manual grains is gonna take up. So it's good to keep note of. This is still recording. So we can go into our manual grains and make sure that it's not even really going that high. Let's make it like something like 4. Instead of a limiter, we can do a compressor. Now we can go over the dub looper, which is a buffer. So you can load into a buffer or record into a buffer. We want to engage it and punch it. This just works like a loop delay. So we're going to make the wet all the way. You won't hear anything because we haven't made a buffer yet. So if you click here and do create new buffer, we can make it something like, for the sake of not freaking out the recording, let's make it something like 9 seconds. Then we can do some granular. What I like to do is add a VCA after the buffer because it just passes through, and then do another stereo mix with the granular stuff that we're going to use. So if you go to the dub looper, can't see the buffer from there, but when we do our grain stretch is what we're going to do now. So you can see it's taking a little longer to load things now that we have a bunch of stuff, and we can check our CPU, have that handy so that we don't freak this out. Grain stretch is awesome. So I'm going to go into grain stretch and select from pool. So pool is like local buffers that you have. So I'm going to find our 9-second one, select that one. Now we hear it. All kind of granular based on this duration. We're also going to change randomly. Which can be from teletype or manually patched. Or you can make another one in here, but that'll take up the CPU. It's actually slow. You actually don't want to use P2. You can avoid using a unit where you can. It's take up less CPU. Again, the duration is going to freak us out. So, see, this is the last thing that we're going to do because we're already at 82. And then we got to change the slice. Oh, actually, no. Change the speed. So that's how we get our granular. You can do this by going to -2 if you have a unipolar voltage, but I can make my random over here bipolar, so that's not really an issue for me. So you get a bipolar random signal or a unipolar random signal. Unipolar means that it's in the positive range only. Bipolar means that it's both positive and negative voltages. So I'm going to be B2. It's so useful because you have so many inputs here. B2 is our random. You see it's going negative and positive over here. And we're going to go 1, so 4, 2. So it goes up and it slows down, and the different speed depends on the size of the grain. Sometimes the grains overlap, etc. We can mix this in now with our original. Maybe the last thing we can add is reverb, because actually that'd be pushing it. But I mean, that's what we have. That's why we have modular. We can add another reverb somewhere else. Now let's say our synthesizer here. Let's copy our synth section. And go to another track and paste it there. So we have all that synth. It's in mono now, so I can get rid of the reverb that's after it. Keep the delay. It's another way to free up some CPU. And then we can add use that channels out to go into some effects and then come back in through a mixer on our main track. So I'm gonna go into a phaser and then into a reverb. We see our return here after the effects. We go back to our main channel. Insert a stereo mix. See, it's a little faster here. We're at 76 just from taking off that reverb. It's C1 and C2. Okay, so one issue that this is a good example. Our drum stopped because we were taking from the local track. So now there's no pulse in that local track. So we're gonna have to take a pulse from somewhere else, like gate 1 or something. So if you move something that you're referencing to on that track, then it's no longer going to be in the local routing. So that's a good thing to note. Thing to probably end this at an hour. So thank you for watching. Hopefully you learned something from that tutorial, and like and subscribe, and maybe drop some comments on what I can do better next time, or if you have any questions, etc. Yeah, I've never recorded anything more than an hour on this, so now I'm kind of scared. So goodbye.